Hello, my name is Sydney Young. This is my first vlog entry on Chapter 1 of Dr. Alan Reed's publishment of the Smartphone Paradox. So I'd like to begin by just giving an overall summary of the first chapter. I think an important definition that is given in the beginning is what the smartphone paradox is. Dr. Reed defines it as the mobile device is simultaneously liberating yet controlling and unifying yet polarizing. So with that definition, he goes into a lot of detail just about how much our smartphones play a role in our lives, without necessarily claiming that anybody is addicted, and without trying to, place blame on anybody that is maybe part of the younger generation that does use technology a little bit more often. He tries to explain how technology plays a very large role, and it plays such a large role that it begins to become who we are and our relationship with other people, how it affects our daily life, the psychological and actual physical changes that happen with the use of smartphones. Through many different quotes, many different authors of other published work, he gets into talking about how technology is not necessarily good, but it's also not bad. And he discusses very many different examples of how we use technology in our daily life and how that can be good, how it can be bad, but that it's not necessarily a great thing either. There's lots of talk about his project that he did run as well, a little bit of an experiment. His study goal was to understand the relationship between narcissism and our smartphone usage. And so through a series of 40 questions, there were a couple different subdivisions given out besides just narcissism, and those were vanity, authoritativeness, self-sufficiency, superiority, exploitativeness, exhibitionism, and entitlement. And it was found out that narcissism was actually inversely related to smartphone usage, which is very different and not necessarily what was the expected hypotheses, and that the people that scored a little bit higher on the narcissist scale were actually desiring that in classroom experience, and they wanted to be there, they wanted to learn, because this was performed in a classroom as well, because he did work with students allowing smartphones in the classroom, doing different activities or whatnot without phones in the classroom as well. Yeah, so that was the experiment that he ran, and he also came up with that with increased smartphone use, there is a decreased GPA, which kind of led him into talk about a lot of how our smartphone usage really determines who we are as a person, our characteristics. It almost defines your fashion, and it just really plays a big role in our lives that maybe not necessarily a lot of people are ready to talk about or openly discuss. So personally, as I was reading this, there was a lot of stuff I wrote down. There's a few things that were mentioned sometimes where even I might have personally felt attacked. I have taken the quiz where it asks you to answer a series of questions that are yes and no based, and then at the end it determines out of how many points you get whether or not you're addicted to your phone, how much you use it, whether or not you should see some sort of therapist for it, and I ended up scoring really high on that, which was expected, but not to where I should be recommended to see someone over my usage. So when he was mentioning stuff in the beginning, trying to get his bias out of the way, he's mentioned that he doesn't want to diagnose all technology users as addicts, and I already personally felt that, I've been blamed because I was considered an addict, and I was already recommended to see some sort of specialist to get over my usage, even though I typically related to paragraph 7 in chapter 1, where Dr. Reed personally talks about his own smartphone habits and how he feels he uses his. That's quite honestly how I feel I use my cell phone. So it'd be interesting to see, what his score would be on that, as I feel that's how I use my smartphone daily. I also found a couple other things when I was reading. There was a section where he discussed with a student a lot about smartphones and how it affects her life. And the student's name was Shanti, and she gets worried about like using Snapchat on an Android phone because the quality is different and people know other classmates, and you honestly get judged for it, which again, it's part of that characteristic stuff he was talking about. And that reminded me of how when people are texting on an iPhone, you have the blue bubbles as messages, and in an Android phone, you get the green bubbles. And that's a big debate, and a lot of people make jokes about it. Oh, you finally have blue bubbles now. So it really does play a big role that I would have never thought about. But that also led me to believe, because he talked a lot about in like the fashion sense of it, if your phone's cracked, if it has a case, if it has a screen protector. My current phone is cracked on the back. There was an issue, it fell, it dropped, and it cracked, and that's the first phone I've actually had kind of shatter, I guess. But growing up, my mother always used to say how the kids with the cracked phones, they never paid attention in class, they always goofed off, they're irresponsible, they weren't raised properly, all that stuff. And now I personally have a cracked phone, and it makes me wonder, how she thinks about me. Like, do other people notice that about me, and does that say a lot about my, smartphone usage, or how I treat other people? Like, how does that message turn into me and my personality? But overall, it was a great chapter. He mentioned a lot about McLuthran, who was the article that we read, The Medium is the Message by Todd Kappelman. I thought McLuhan had a lot of very interesting stuff to say, mostly with his amputation and extension stuff, which gets mentioned a few times in Dr. Reed's work. He talks about how, like, the smartphone is an extension of, connection or communication, but it's also an amputation because now you're missing that, like face-to-face or the use of letters, all that. The article that we read, What is New Media by Bailey Socha and Barbara Everschmid, they discuss not necessarily what the definition of new media is, because it's, constantly changing, so you can't really necessarily give it an official definition, but there's a lot of stuff in there as well about how there's negative things and there's positive things, but one of the big things I took from that paper is that new media is an enabler. And if you were per se to define technology, smartphones as new media, those smartphones are an enabler too. I mean, Dr. Reed makes that very clear throughout his paperwork, that we just, we don't know what we're even doing. We're just so subconsciously wanting to pick up the phone or check the text message or the email or whatever. That buzz gives us the sensation that we need to pick it up, and it gives that dopamine rush that he's mentioned, and that immediate gratification. So it's definitely an enabler, and like he says, it's a call for action. It's something we need to address and try to figure out. So I'm excited to see where the rest of the paper goes throughout the semester, and we'll talk next time.